An open world.
AJ's tripping about some kind of video game news, and the show hasn't even started yet. I guess technically it started.
This Diablo 4 update in open world? This is gonna frustrate me. I don't want to read this anymore.
In an open world, one Diablo,
where it's not really open at all.
Are you saying you're closed to an open world?
Yes.
I cracked myself up at very little effort. All right. Well, let's get right into it then. Let's dive into the topics and the podcasts and the thingies and the talkings. Oh, okay. I'm getting updates about us being live right now. My phone's like, what's going on?
Classic.
Oh, we're here. All right.
That's funny.
Well, it is pretty good. It's pretty good.
Haven't had the chance to play it yet, Pierre.
Yeah. I'll probably talk a little bit about what I've been reading about that inside of today's conversation, because it's part of what prompted me. We've also talked about this a little bit already with the game reviews, but let's get into it. Welcome in to the DNVR Gaming Podcast, brought to you by WGT Golf, the most beloved free golf game in the world. You can download it right now at dnvrgolf.com. Again, that's totally for free. You can play closest to a hole or stroke play on world-famous golf tour courses. You can play against any of us on the DNVR staff. Most of the people in the DNVR community these days are out there playing. You can join our country club. You can have a lot of fun, whether you plan on becoming a pro and getting all that awesome top golf gear that you can acquire, or if you're like me and you just use it as a relaxing way to hit a ball with a stick. Whatever your methodology, we do appreciate WGT Golf being the official sponsor.
I don't know what you talking about.
You got it going on, Rudo?
No part of WGT Golf is relaxing when you're playing in our tournaments, all right? That is serious business.
Tournaments are not for the relaxing. I show up to get my butt thoroughly kicked on Sundays, and I usually accomplish that task.
Can confirm.
On today's episode, we wanted to talk about something that we've sort of brushed up against a number of times. I think it's a really interesting conversation in the modern world of video gaming. I think most of the three of us, I think the three of us mostly, remember a time or grew up at some point during a time when video game reviews were almost like a golden commodity. It was a thing we sought out. There was a time when sources like GameSpot and IGN, anybody get Electronic Gaming Monthly literally delivered to their house every month in the 90s.
I had EGM for years.
I had the Xbox Gaming magazine delivered for a couple years, like physical paper magazine that like every month you got and you're like, oh, what's the new game review? And like every quarter, one of the magazines would come with like a demo disc.
Oh yeah.
And that was like the best day ever.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I would do is I would skip whatever the cover story of EGM was and just go straight to the reviews.
Right.
And just read the game reviews for hours.
Yep.
And I think part of that was because, and I can't speak for the two of you, obviously, but I didn't have a lot of friends that played video games, and even the ones that did, there was like a handful of us that were really hardcore into it enough to want to read a review. So there wasn't a chat room or a group or somewhere we could go where we could just get an unending flow of opinions. There wasn't YouTube and all of this stuff and Twitter. And so it was just like, well, this is where I can get somebody else's opinion about a thing before I buy it. And, I feel like we all probably relied on a lot of those recommendations. So the question that we'll be answering today, and I'll throw it, for the first whack at it to you, AJ, here is, in the modern world, most of us know the games we are going to love and the ones we're never going to try. If you're on the fence about a new video game, and you want a recommendation, a review, some outside influence on whether or not you should try it out, where do you go?
YouTube.
To a specific source or
No, I googled the game title and then gameplay or playthrough, and then I click through the actual game, because a lot of times that's what will push me over. Is I like the concept of a game, I'm familiar with the mechanics or whatever, but I want to see what the actual realized game looks like. I want to see somebody play through it, so I'll watch at most 10 or 15 minutes of deciding on whether or not I want to play that game or not. There's a series called This Is the Police that I really enjoyed. And I just stumbled across them because I check the weekly sales in the Nintendo eShop every week, and one of them was in there, and I was like, oh, let me see what this is about. And I thought it was interesting enough, and it was on sale for $5, and I watched a YouTube video of it, and I got a solid 25 hours out of the first game, and probably double that out of the second game.
Yeah.
So it, and that's how I make that decision, is because I won't go to IGN and read a review anymore. I don't need a review of games. I know what kind of games I like. I'm familiar enough with game mechanics. If there's something different about the game mechanic, like if you're playing Bravely Default or something, where combat is very specific, it works in a certain way, then I will read more about it. But if it's pretty standard, pretty straightforward stuff that you're familiar with, you don't really need a game review for a lot of that. You just need to see, for me, I just need to see, does this fully realized concept appeal to me?
Yeah, it's funny. Rudo was talking about earlier how, and I totally agree, that like demos, again, like if reviews were a gold commodity, then demos were a platinum diamond item that you could find. They would show up occasionally, and it was this rare opportunity to actually get your hands on the game. Now with YouTube, we can literally for free watch anybody play any game and get more or less a sense of it. Rudo, is that your general modus operandi as well? Head over to YouTube, check out some plays.
Yeah. So there was once upon a time in my life where that wasn't it.
I love a once upon a time.
I was a person for a while who was very into the beta scene, and maybe this is something we'll talk about later in the show, but I really liked going into games blindly, and sometimes you're gonna have a bad experience with a game when that happens, but playing through the story without any idea of what's going on and learning the game from square one is something that I really enjoyed. So that's something I like to. It's something I still like to do when it comes to smaller games or games that I can buy for relatively cheap. But as an adult with a job in a world where if I'm going to pay $60 for a video game, I'm not going to drop $60 on something that I have no idea what I'm getting from. I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
So in that regard, yeah, absolutely. YouTube, I think, is great, or depending on the age of the game and the fan base, you can always go to Twitch and watch someone play live as well and get people's opinions there. So
yeah, I think one of the things we're all recognizing too is that, like, maybe in the early days of the industry, it made some sense for every video game every video game review, regardless of publication, to come with the same basic rubric, like gameplay, graphics, sound, story, and 1 through 10, and then you've got and it just does not make sense in a world where video games have dramatically different reasons for existing, things that they want you to experience, whether they be 10-hour isolated indie solo story-driven experiences that cost you $10 or a $60 AAA RPG that's supposed to last hundreds of hours. Like, you can't apply one rubric to every single video game, and publications still trying to do so look remarkably silly.
Honestly, when it comes to a written review, I don't particularly find them useful beyond what's the main summary of this game. Does it sound like something I will like based on that? And is the game broken? Yes or no?
Right. Right. Oh, just in time. But yeah, right. Like, is it playable? And is this something that I'm interested in? I also, and I agree with you too. Like, I've always had that poll. One of my favorite quotes of all time, Shakespeare, good place to go for a favorite quote, but expectation is the root of all heartache. I am thoroughly of the opinion that people ruin movies and TV shows and video games for themselves by having just expectations that it's going to be one thing, it turns into something else. And, you know, all of these reviews can, in a way, spoil that for you. But I do think, I submit that there's a new way emerging, a new lane where you're still reviewing the game. And it's not just, hey, watch me play. Like, I'm going to give you my opinion of the game that I think is a bit more valuable, but it risks, you know, being very echo chambery. And that's basically fine, because it's the answer to the question I was talking about earlier, right? Not every game has the same purpose. And so finding people who, you know, are more experts in, say, that given purpose of maybe it's a given genre or whatever it may be. I'll give you an example of a YouTube reviewer I really like that has a specific slant. And I think there should be more of this type of thing. It's this gal called Girlfriend Reviews. She's blown up quite a bit over the last several months. And she reviews video games entirely from the perspective, not of somebody who plays them, but as somebody who watches somebody play them and what that experience is like. And so she gives like this big disclaimer right at the beginning, like, this is not a review of Red Dead Redemption 2. This is a review of what it's like to live with someone who plays Red Dead Redemption 2 for 12 hours a day. And I think it's just another way to like take a look at video games without the lens always having to be, how do you score it on graphics, gameplay, story? You know, it's like, no, I'm scoring this on my own rubric. And her particular rubric is, do I enjoy watching my boyfriend play this? I'd love to see things like, is this a philosophically interesting experience, or is this an artistically interesting experience? And so people who are just looking for that can go to that reviewer.
Yeah, scoring games in certain categories 1 to 10 is just, it's too difficult, because you would give, like, take Halo. If you're looking for an action game, yeah, it's going to get a really high score. But if you're rolling up on that and you're like, oh, I want a super intense RPG with a party and all the classic loot elements of a game, it's going to get a terrible score. They're just not comparable.
I think written reviews are, for the gaming industry, what game recaps are to what we do. Where people just don't really read game recaps anymore. You know, my game recaps are a couple paragraphs of what happened during the game, and then it's all takeaways. It's all just analysis stuff.
Yep.
I think that's because, and it's been way more popular since we switched to that.
Right.
Either that, or I'll write a quote piece on top of it, you know, because I talked to somebody after the game, before the game, whatever. I have a quote story, and then we'll do quote pieces and then analysis underneath of that. And that, I think, should be, if there's one thing I would love to hear more of, it's game developers giving interviews about their products. Tell me why I should care about this. Tell me what the design process was, what the thought process was behind some of the decisions that you made in the game. What were you trying to accomplish with different things that you did in the games? Because sometimes when I'm playing through games, like Rudo and I will play we'll play StarCraft and we'll be like, did they even play this?
Yep.
Like, there will be aspects of it where you're like, this is just unrealistic. Did they test this? And I would love to have, you know, hey, here's a developer interview that you can sit down and like, there are some that exist, and it's nice to have those. The problem is that the majority of the time, developers only talk about their games in the lead up to the release.
Yep.
Right.
Because they're trying to sell the game. They don't, as soon as the game comes out, like Anthem came out and everybody forgot about it within 10 minutes. Developer had nothing to say.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would love for them to come out and be like, hey, so this is what we were doing, this is what we were trying, this is why this didn't work, this is why this didn't resonate with players, and this is how we want to correct it. Like, I would love for more of that kind of communication. Give me more, in the same way that we go and talk to players to get it straight from the horse's mouth, to get it straight from the source. What did you see? Break this down for me. What was interesting about this? X's and O's of this and that. The same way. View the gaming industry in sort of a similar lens. Go and give me the X's and O's breakdowns of where your game worked and where it didn't work, and if you're going to continue to support it, why should I give it
fixing that shit? Yeah,
right. Like, why should I give a rip about any DLC? What are you going to do to switch any of the systems? We're several months into Animal Crossing being out, and I'm still throwing a fit because it takes me 20 minutes to buy all the stuff from Sahara every day because I have to have 7 different conversations. I can't just buy everything all at once. And it's like, it's like classic frustrating Nintendo that just doesn't need to exist. But I would love to ask a developer, why? Why can we not, I think developers need to be more communicative with their player bases. And, Steam has been great for that because you go on Steam and now there's like a whole page for the game and they can communicate. There's a separate forum for every single game that you can go on and they can talk to the players as much or as little as they want to. And I just think it's in their best interest to talk, to build those audiences. Game developers are just like us. We're trying to sell a thing. We're covering a thing. We're doing a thing. You need to communicate with your audience a little bit better. And I would love to see some of that. Less, I don't need game reviews in the classic iteration, the same way we don't need game recaps anymore. But you've got to find a way to adapt and survive. And both the gaming journalism industry and game developers, I think, need to work together to try and come up with a better way to communicate.
I mean, yeah, you kind of touched on it with talking about how the game developer is almost always available to do something in the lead up to the release of a game because they're trying to sell it.
Yeah.
And the problem there is, one, no one has their hands on a copy of the game, so they can't ask relevant questions. And the way the gaming industry has developed is there's rarely any substance when it comes to those type of things. It's just a hype train where they hype up the game. Take No Man's Sky.
That's exactly the game I had in mind.
Yeah, where Sean Murray goes on this PR tour and basically just says yes to every question that's ever asked of him, regardless of what's actually going to happen with the game. And it ends up being a disaster on release because there was no basis for anything. There was no foundation on any of the game. And granted, Hello Games, I believe it's Hello Games, is that did a very good job over the years after release to make that game what they wanted it to be. But the lack of availability to fact check things, I suppose, in the hype cycle just made everything a walking disaster when it came to that game's release. And now it took a significant amount of effort because here's what happens with video game reviews. They get written when the game is released and that's it. You're basically done with your video game reviews at that point. At least with the major publications and things like that, they move on and it's done. So when it comes to games that actually do get updates and do consistently work on the framework of their games, it's really hard to change the tide.
Right.
And No Man's Sky is one of the few games that has done this successfully.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where you release a game with hopes to fix it. It's terrible. It gets terrible reviews. It goes down the drain, and then they just give up because it never worked.
So have either of you followed the saga of The Last of Us 2 and its reviews and everything that's going on there? Okay. So
I don't care.
Before we started today, Pierre came in and was talking about having just finished it and really digging it. It plays a really interesting role in this conversation as sort of the most recent AAA title to run into this problem. It's got a 94 on Metacritic from critical reviews, and it was at 3.7. I think it's gone up to like 4 point something from the fans. And part of the reason, to my understanding, is that was basically an embargo put on like the final 12 hours of the game where most of the controversial content is. And most of the people who even wrote their original reviews weren't allowed to talk about certain elements of the game. Now, I should say not everyone's offended by them. What I've read, there are a lot of people angry for a lot of different reasons, which sort of gets back to our people just want different things in games. And it's very, very difficult to please a wide audience when you're doing risky stuff. And it sounds like they took a lot of risks. But the point I'm trying to make, back to the No Man's Sky conversation, to not get too deep into, the violence of The Last of Us or whatever, is developers making it like putting embargoes on games so that you can't write about certain elements of it. And if you can't dive into it, and they say because it's spoilery, and I think it is, but it's also like that you create this enormous gap between critical reviews and the response of the audience playing the game.
I hate this. If you don't want spoilers, that's on you. It's your job to avoid them. It's not companies' jobs to hide things and not allow things to be put out there.
Put a spoiler alert and say, hey, the end of the game is going to be revealed. If you're okay with that, then continue on. If you're not, click out of this.
Exactly.
As long as you're responsible and you say, hey, this is coming, then I have no issues with it. It's like you said, it's on you. You want to avoid. I managed to avoid. I didn't start watching Game of Thrones until season 7. I managed to avoid 7 years worth of spoilers. Didn't know anything about the show until I started watching it.
Oh, nice.
It's not hard to do.
Right.
If on Sunday nights Game of Thrones comes on, you bail on Twitter. Like if you just don't get involved in those conversations. You just don't put yourself in a position, and there will be people who will try and ruin things for you. The guy who shows up outside of the Harry Potter movie with the megaphone and says, X character kills X character. And it's like, dude, that's a bad guy. Like that's somebody that you hope snaps his legs walking out of his house tomorrow.
Right.
But this game developers being so protective of the content, don't do that. Like the whole embargoing of information bothers me. If you're gonna send out advanced copies of your games for the purposes of reviews, you need to be fine with it.
Yeah.
Then you made a bad game, Ouroboros.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that. If you're actively already trying to avoid information that could potentially damage your game before it's released,
don't release it. Change the game.
Why did you make it that way?
Right. And I should say, as a disclaimer, I have not played The Last of Us 2. I did watch a ton of videos and spoiled it for myself just because I was drawn into the controversy and was very curious about what was going on there. But yeah,
man, see, this is what I'm saying. Your bubble is as big or as small as you want, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly. And I had never had any of these games. Like, I had always had it kind of on my periphery. Like, I might play those Last of Us games. I'm not.
I played the first one. It's good.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into it based on the research that I've done.
It's emotionally manipulative, but it's good.
Yeah, which is fine. But and that sort of reminds me of like another point, like about our, the difference. The need and difference, because a lot of these positive reviews about The Last of Us are also saying, this really is the apex of video game storytelling and, a real adult content for gamers. And we haven't had this kind of thing. And I think that's just another reminder that for some people, R-rated gritty realism is their only way to consider content to be adult. That's not the way for me. And so I find that to be remarkably non-compelling in these reviews. And that's why 90% of the Last of Us reviews that have been very positive are not helpful to me, because they're all framed in this way about what a coming of age for the video game industry. And I'm like, bro, Chrono Trigger came out in 1994. Like, get off the damn high horse. Like,
Yeah.
what you talking about?
Yeah, I've just personally, and obviously, again, there's a line here because I'm not familiar with the second game at all. But I always felt the first game was really like a great game. It's really well made, but it was so overrated in terms of the impact on the industry, and we've never seen something like this before. And it's like, dude,
This happens a lot in the gaming industry, where you get not only fan bases of games, but I guess the entire circle of people that review them and the creators. They just, everything has to be revolutionary.
they're hostages in the moment.
Yeah. And you end up with these communities of basically people that just love smelling their own farts at the end of the day.
Right.
And it's something I've absolutely fallen victim to with games in the past as well. But they could do, the entire video game industry could do with a lot of humility. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like everybody wants to be part of something special.
of
You
course,
want to experience something special. And gaming especially, it strives to give you a unique experience that you remember, that resonates with you. And so I think a lot of these guys, they let the wish be the father of the thought.
yeah.
And that puts them permanently in a place of recency bias.
I've noticed a very similar trend in the comic book movie world as well, where it's like once every 2 years, somebody writes, now this is a comic book movie for adults. And it's like, bruh, we've been doing this for a minute. Like,
Yeah, it's like,
since
look,
1989.
Zack Snyder's didn't make an adult comic. He made a comic book movie for emo kids. Okay, like,
Now, hold on.
this would have resonated with me so much when I was 16 years old and hated my life. Like, don't give me that adult nonsense.
Right.
Just because it's dark and gritty doesn't make it adult, guys.
Well, that's actually, as a defender of Zack Snyder, I think that's actually a perfect example where, like, the film 300 is more violent and grotesque and a much more hard R rating, but it's not a more adult movie than Wonder Woman, which is like a PG-13, highly stylized, more campy movie, but that actually has much more interesting ethos to it and thought and kind of delicacy of themes.
Yeah, but there's sex in 300.
Right, so it's more adult,
So it's
right?
more adult.
Right, that's my thing. Is it's like, you know, games like Zelda and Final Fantasy, those aren't adults because look at the kids running around in their silly outfits.
Yeah, well, and there's the whole spectrum of gamers that don't take Nintendo games seriously because they're like, well, they're just cartoons.
There's no adult
Look at them, and then you're like,
these people never cried at a Pixar movie
so
before.
you haven't played it, is
Well,
what you're
yeah,
saying. Like, got it.
Even if you take like a super simple game, what's it called? The string game for PlayStation. I forget. Little Big
no.
World.
Okay.
Little Big Planet.
Yeah, Little Big Planet. Thank you. Who cares if a game's more adult or not? Is it fun? Like,
Well, and that's one of the more creative franchises of the last decade or
right?
two.
Like, regardless of what you want to qualify as, oh, this makes it something more adult or not. You can have a game with no adult themes that's plenty fun. You can have a game with only adult themes that is plenty of fun. It does not matter. The being adult or not does not define a good video game or a good movie.
I think that's why I made in my head the comic book connection, because that's something that industry has fought for years and years. I still have fights with people when they're like, well, comic books are for kids, aren't they? I'm like, stop saying that, please.
Yes, definitely. Watching Captain America die on the steps of the Capitol building after Civil War was certainly for a 9-year-old.
It just
like all of the themes that go into that, and Iron Man crying over his dead body. That was definitely for 11-year-old me.
Right.
I totally would have appreciated the gravity of that. Like, fuck off.
Remember, it was there was that whole controversy about people taking their kids to see Deadpool and being like, I didn't know. I thought it was a comic book movie. I didn't know
it was rated R. They literally tag specific things in that movie that are not suitable for kids who are 10.
Here's what we about to do.
We're kind of off the rails of why game reviews aren't great, but it's a good discussion as we all just rail against things we don't like.
I do think to bring us back to it a little bit, though, that those things are related a little bit, is that I think one thing, too, is that a lot of times, people reviewing video games, they play all the video games, and they have an opinion that's centered on how a video game works as a video game. But my girlfriend might care more about how a video game works as a movie, and you might care more about how a video game works as a few hours of distracting entertainment, or you might care more about how it feels as a visually or audio aesthetic experience, or you might want a great story, or whatever it may be. And so I think it's tough because these guys I think there's the same thing in movies, where it's like your job is to see all the movies and then review it for people who see maybe 4 or 5 movies in the theater a year if you go to the movies a lot. And it's just, it's like Rudo was saying, we're adults who've got jobs, and a $60 video game is an investment. I probably buy a AAA title maybe once a quarter, 4 times a year. Those are the if that. I've paid full $60. Yeah.
I've paid a full $60 for a game maybe 4 times in the last several years.
Right.
And 3 of them have been in the last year, and just because I was a little more financially stable and could do it. Right. Otherwise, I totally would have waited.
Yeah, I know, right? Got this hat now from basically tenure at DNVR. You get the reporter hat. Right. But seriously though, that means that by nature, our experience with video games is dramatically different from somebody who's reviewing a brand new title once a week, or 2 or 3 of them a week. We just don't have the same experience with games. So how are you recommending me anything?
Well, and it's kind of going back to what we do for a living. It's kind of the same thing. Our job is to go to all of the games and watch all of the games and to know all of the things about all of the games that we cover. And then people look to us for the expertise on all of the nuances of all of the games and all of the players and all of the strategies and all of that. And that's great. That's what I could use video game reviewers for if they would just change up their format.
Right.
I don't need to know what the graphics score is, because I can tell you right now, the last thing I ever care about in any game at all is graphics. If I like the artwork, I will. And it's funny because there are a lot of games where I'm like, oh, I love the artwork. I'm working my way through Dragon Quest 11 right now. I love the art style, but it's not
pushing the bounds of the technology.
Well, and it's not changing my experience with it. It looks cool, and so it makes it easy for me to look at. But I play tons of the indie games that have come out that have that old 8-bit, 16-bit graphics that we got when we were kids, and those are ugly games. They're not great looking games, and they're now intentionally made to be that way. It's no longer a limitation of technology. They're doing it because they want to make the game look like this. I don't care either way. Make a fun game that appeals to me, and I'm there. And they treat all the game reviews and all that. They treat every game like the same entity, and that's where I'm I have less and less of a desire to consume this material.
The reality of the video game industry is we live in a world where whatever information you want to find out from a video game is readily available, and you're not required to go to a major source to get it. There are communities on IRC or on Discord to where you can go and you can find
IRC. How old are you?
Yeah, old enough. You can find whatever you want. You can go find a server right now that just like data mined the upcoming patch for Stardew Valley and what's coming in that.
Mhm.
So you don't need the bigger name industries as much when it comes to video games.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more and more these, specified outlets. So this is my attempt to end this conversation on a happy note, because we've basically just been trashing.
If a game reviewer or game journalist ever sees this and would love to come on and defend themselves in their careers and tell us what it's like from their side of things,
rock and roll.
Yeah.
Doors open.
Yep. But I do want to ask you this, because I think while we're living at like an all-time low for the value and quality of written video game reviews, I think we're living at an all-time high for quality, if you can find it, certainly quantity of in-depth video game conversation once it's come out. Like you said, AJ, I wish that the developers would participate every once in a while. I do have to give big ups to my guys after a decade of dropping the ball over and over and over again. After 7 Remake came out and there were a ton of questions, they went on an answering tour and were like, yes, what you think is happening is happening. Yes, the next iterations are going to be different. No, we're not changing things too dramatically. Don't freak out. They talk to the fan base. So big ups to those guys after a decade of silence and bad communication. But I wanted to I'll start with you, Rudo, on this, just some recommendations of whether it's podcasts or YouTubers, people you feel like are having great conversations about games. And then, like we've been saying, sometimes they're not even framed at reviews, but essentially this is what they are now. Like, let's talk about the game and everything it does, the things we like, the things we don't like, what it means to us. So do you have, some go-tos for that? Podcasts, YouTubers, what else might it be? Even just people on Twitter that, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it before on the show, but Video Game Donkey on YouTube is an excellent source for me because he doesn't take it seriously at all. He just goes in and has fun with the game, and as he's playing through the game, he's like, "Oh, this was fun," or "Oh, this was incredibly stupid," and makes jokes and tries to have a good time. And at the end of the video, he's like, "Wow, that was way funner than I thought," or "Wow, that was the worst experience of my life."
Either way.
Yeah, the other thing to get my my one per show talk of World of Warcraft in, that community is just so incredibly in depth. I have a Patreon plan with a website that was created by some random guy who plays the game, that created a whole algorithm to tell you how to optimize your character in the game. Like, it'll tell you which gear is better. It'll tell you what to do, which paths to take as far as like skills in the game. And that's, I think, exactly what the future of gaming is becoming, is you find your community and you can go as hard or as easy as you want on it. You can take the donkey route of saying, I'm just here to chill and play this game. Or you can say, I want to know every single aspect of every single nook and cranny.
AJ, do you have any go-to? And it really is, it's like you were talking about, with our sports analogy earlier. It's like analysis as much as it is reviews. Do you have any favorite analysis people?
No.
Cool. You just go to the plays, right? Yeah.
Like these days, I'm pretty picky about the games that I choose to invest my time in, because the time it's significantly more limited than it used to be. And so I would rather sit down and play 5 hours of StarCraft than 5 hours of a new game. Yeah. Because I know what I'm going to get out of StarCraft. And like my gaming life, when the pandemic started, we had nothing going on. I was burning through my games. I was flying through my backlog. And then, we sort of settled into a work rhythm. All of us settled into a work rhythm where we're producing content on the site. We're making pods. We're making videos. Like, we're as busy as we've ever been.
I was going to say,
despite the fact that sports haven't been on now for 3 months, nothing has changed for us.
That first week, maybe 2, felt like we had some time off, and then all of a sudden
the first 2 weeks was really tough.
Yeah,
like it was like, and like Animal Crossing had just come out, so I was just sitting around all day in my chair, just.
What a great time for Animal Crossing and 7 Remake to drop for us, dude. It's like we got this window of time.
Yeah, but since then, like I just don't. I don't have any specific. It's all about the individual game for me. I don't spend very much of my time reading or doing anything about games like that anymore. Getting into those you know what I have? I have a gaming pod that I come on and I talk to you dudes.
There you go.
Like,
boom shakalaka.
This is where I get to do a lot of my gaming talk. Or if I'm playing a game, you know, the fiance is a big gamer, so we play games together now. Though the challenge is finding ones we both want to play. Sure. You know, the new Avengers game coming out looks great to me, and she's like, there's not a chance in hell I would buy that at full price. And for me, I'm like, I've waited 10 years for this, you know, like
right. Yeah, well, and you know, we talk to each other in Slack and Discord and all these other things about it. So yeah, we have avenues for getting the opinions of people that we trust.
Yeah.
Our friend Trent here in the comments saying Digital Foundry is good if you're a big tech or spec nerd and you want to hear about the performance and features of different games. Every once in a while, I'll get into that. Like I feel like once a year, I'm like, yeah, I want to hear about teraflops, and then I'm over it by the end of that day. You know?
like set it up and do your benchmark test and like let's get, you know, like I cared a lot more about when like Crysis was a big deal.
I still care about it, but like at the end of the day, every time it just makes me sad. Because it's like, oh, here's my graphics card, and it's like, and over there is the 2080 Ti, and it's like,
well, you're like, oh, I run stuff. I run all my stuff pretty comfortably, right? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm doing just fine in terms of a system.
Yeah.
And then somebody does one of these tests, and you're like,
oh,
boy, all right. Your rig costs 4 times what mine does.
Yep.
Got any of that juice? Well,
this is a bad feeling.
Now I feel bad.
I Cygnus rolls in at the very end of the
show. I know,
show.
right? What up, Cygnus? We're about to sign off. I've got a couple of recommendations, mostly because I just enjoy conversations and podcasts in general about games and gaming. Obviously, you know, like you said, I like this podcast. My brother and I do a Final Fantasy podcast where we really dive into that stuff. There's also a great community out there, the FF Union on YouTube. They do a great job. A lot of people are familiar with them, but What Culture on YouTube, they do a lot of like pro wrestling stuff as well. That's kind of what they're known for, but their video game stuff I find to be remarkably entertaining and informative, and they manage to take a wide angle view and, you know, give that kind of review we were talking about where I don't think they score games. They just have a conversation about them and tell you some things you should know about it. So those are some of my favorite sources in lieu of no longer going to GameSpot and IGN, which I haven't checked in over a decade, I'm sure. And I used to, you know, go there every single day to check those sites back in the day, but there's just no use for it. No use for it. We live in a new world. So if there are any others out there that you all have that you think, hey, that these guys are doing what we've been talking about here today, more analysis and conversation and recommendation as opposed to the old school review, you know, let us know. At least definitely. I'll be interested in checking them out, and you know, hopefully we can fit that category for some people as we talk about stuff and move along through here. Final thoughts, boys? Feeling good?
We should have a gaming pod question show.
Yeah,
like a trivia show.
No, like a
listener questions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
we've never done one.
Yeah, just a mailbag.
Yeah, I'm thinking it would be fun if we could do that. Also, we should get the boss on here.
Yeah, we need to get Brandon on here
to have him scream about video games.
We need a topic he can't say no to. That's what, if you get him something like, I almost pulled him onto the movie stuff for boxing. Like I got close with, you know, you got to hit those right. And I talk about Final Fantasy all the time, so that's not going to work because that's the other thing. He's a big FF guy.
Yeah. Well, and he's actually he's also going through Dragon Quest XI right now. He was the one. It went on sale a couple weeks ago, and so that's why I finally picked it up. Is because I was waiting for the definitive edition on Switch to go on sale.
Get Brandon on here, to tell us why Madden is worth it and EA isn't terrible.
I don't need that corporate shilling on my pods. I'll advertise shaving my balls and drinking whatever alcohol is paying us and smoking whatever weed, whatever, right? But I will not shill for EA.
I draw the line
unless EA is going to pay us,
right?
If you're sponsor the show.
I mean,
put that evil on us, Ricky Bobby.
You're dangerously close to another problem in the video game review industry. But
this is where I'd love to get somebody to actually come on because I want to know how much of a problem it truly is.
Yeah,
because it feels like there are people who take pot shots at sports media and media like if you go on Reddit, there were 2 weeks ago on the Avs subreddit there was somebody who was talking about Matt Murray. And the only reason we talked about Matt Murray at all was because there was this rumor out of Pittsburgh about Matt Murray, right? Yep. And it was the only reason we talked about it. And this person in the Avs subreddit was like, media's just bored, so they're making shit up right now. And it was like, do you think Rudo and I sat down and were like,
you know who would be interested in a rumor about?
Pittsburgh has a goalie controversy. Let's talk about Matt Murray today and say there was a rumor out there that we heard about that we can specifically point to.
Right.
And like that, and like it has that sort of feel to it when people are like, oh, video game reviews are bought and paid for by their companies, where it's like, there are people out there who make trade rumors up. Just like there are gaming companies out there who pay for good reviews. But I want to know how prevalent it is. Yeah. I want to know what it actually is like. Like, I want to know how much it actually happens. I would love to get an answer to that because I assume most of these reviewers are going into it like, I'm just doing my job.
Right.
And like very rarely are they going to get like leaned on from somebody who's like, hey, buddy, this can't be any lower than an 8. Where it's like, okay, whatever. Pay for me to go on a vacation, a month-long vacation to Barbados, and I'll give it a 9.5.
Right, exactly. You give me that money under the table, and look, the NHL 21 is about to be an 11 out of 10, man.
Just game-breaking advances here. Just a light years jump in quality of games for the NHL series.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Finally,
I would love to know how real that actually is in the industry.
I would too. Because, as the king of Homer Mountain over on Rocky's Reddit, where I've always got an alternative motive for everything I've ever reported, despite having like a much better track record than most of the other people. It's just like, it can be really frustrating having your motives called into question in a blanket way like that. So, maybe we'll have a game reviewer on sometime. That's the other thing we should do.
Anybody but Greg Miller.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, that dork is not allowed on our show.
Boom. There you have it. Let us know which reviewer you would like to see us have on the show. Maybe contact them yourself. Set that up for us if you can. If you've got the connects, let us know.
Where's Spence when you need him?
Right.
Probably at work.
Probably.
Like, not giving a damn about gaming.
Come on, man. It's the wave of the future. The wave of the future. So we appreciate everyone listening into this off-the-wall conversation that hopefully provided some insight into something. Not quite sure what we were going for. It was fun for us, though, so hopefully it was fun for you. We'll continue to have, maybe next week we'll do a mailbag. We'll see if we've got any topics. But if you've got questions for us, make sure you're subscribed to the DNVR.com so you can come into the Discord, chat with us in the lounge. We can, start to field some questions there. We'll put them together for the next show, or you can always join us during the lives. Especially make sure that you are subscribed to our Twitch channel and to our YouTube channel. Give a like and subscribe on that YouTube. It makes things a lot easier to find. And then you'll know when we go live, generally on Thursday afternoons, and you can join us for the live chat. Also, make sure that you are downloading and playing and, practicing really hard so that Mom will be proud. Your WGT Golf. You can get it for free at DNVRGolf.com. Thanks for listening today. For Rudo and AJ, I'm Drew Kreisman. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.